I'm Amy, 30 female. I live in a glass house on a cliff overlooking the ocean, a place I designed myself as a testament to transparency and strength. I built my life from the ground up, creating a successful software company from nothing but an idea and a refusal to fail. This life of peace and success was born from the ashes of a family who decided I was no longer one of them. For 8 years, I was dead to them, a ghost they chose to forget, until the day their own world crumbled and they came looking for a savior in the daughter they had thrown away. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. It wasn't a single, dramatic event that broke my world. It was more like a slow, crushing pressure that finally shattered the foundations of everything I thought was true. The day it all culminated, however, is burned into my memory with the clarity of a flash fire. I was 22, fresh out of university with a degree in computer science, and an idea that I believed with every fiber of my being could change the way small businesses managed their logistics. It was ambitious, naive, and entirely my own. I called it SyncFlow. To me, it wasn't just code. It was a promise of independence, a way to build something that would be mine in a family where everything felt conditional. My family, on the surface, was the picture of middle-class success. My father, Alfred, ran a bespoke carpentry business, crafting beautiful, expensive furniture for wealthy clients. My mother, Nicola, was a recently retired history teacher who believed in rigid principles and the importance of appearances. And then there was Mia, my older sister. A corporate lawyer already making a name for herself, Mia was the golden child, sharp, ruthless, and always my parents' point of pride. I was the quiet one, the dreamer, the one who spent more time with computers than people. They loved me, I thought, but they didn't quite understand me. My passion for technology was a strange hobby to them, not a serious career path like Mia's. The breaking point was alone. I had bootstrapped my project through college, working 3 part-time jobs and living on instant noodles. I had a working prototype, a solid business plan, and a few potential clients lined up. All I needed was a small seed investment of $50,000 to rent a small office space, hire a junior developer, and get the servers I needed to launch officially. I exhausted every other option. The banks laughed at a 22-year-old with no collateral. I was too small for venture capitalists, so with my heart in my throat, I turned to my family. I wasn't asking for a handout. I presented it as a formal loan request. I drafted a contract, proposed a generous interest rate, and laid out a repayment plan. I spent a week preparing a presentation, complete with market analysis and 5-year projections. I wanted to show them I was serious, professional, and worthy of their trust. I arranged a family meeting in the formal living room, the one with Dad's handcrafted mahogany table and Mom's pristine white couches that no one was ever supposed to actually sit on. I felt like a child playing dress-up in my only blazer. Alfred, Nicola, and Mia sat opposite me like a parole board. I went through my presentation, my voice shaking at first but growing steadier as I spoke about SyncFlow. I explained the code, the market gap, the potential for growth. I saw a flicker of interest in my father's eyes when I talked about helping small businesses like his. My mother's expression remained a carefully neutral mask. Mia, however, was smirking. It was a subtle, condescending curl of her lip that she'd perfected over years of belittling my dreams. When I finished, the silence was deafening. My father cleared his throat. "Amy, it's impressive the work you've put in." My mother immediately cut in. "Alfred, let's be realistic. This is a fantasy. Amy, you have a good degree. There are stable jobs at established companies. Why risk everything on a computer game?" I tried to explain that it wasn't a game, that it was a legitimate business tool, but my words were drowned out by Mia's cold, cutting laughter. "Oh, Amy, this is adorable," she said, picking up my printed business plan and flicking through it with disdain. "You really think someone is going to pay for this? You're asking Mom and Dad to throw away their retirement savings on your little hobby." The argument escalated quickly. I pleaded, trying to get them to see the potential to see me, but Mia was relentless. She twisted my ambition into recklessness, my passion into childish fantasy. She framed my request as an entitled demand that would put our parents' future in jeopardy. Dad's business is facing competition from overseas, she argued, her voice filled with foul. See concern. They need to be careful with their money. You're being incredibly selfish. That was the knife that twisted deepest. Selfish. I had never asked them for anything, not really. I put myself through school. I never took an allowance past 16. This one time, I was asking for a loan, for a chance, and they were calling me a burden. My father, a man I'd always believed was quietly on my side, began to waver under the combined pressure of his wife and eldest daughter. Mia has a point, Amy, he said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. It's a huge risk. The final blow came from my mother. Her face, which had been neutral, hardened into a mask of disappointment. We are not giving you the money, she said, her voice leaving no room for appeal. And frankly, I'm disappointed you would even put us in this position. Your sister is thinking about this family's security. You are only thinking of yourself. The discussion is over. I was shattered. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was the complete and utter dismissal of my life's passion. It was the way they looked at me, not as a daughter with a dream, but as a problem to be managed. I felt a cold fury rise in my chest. Fine, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I don't need your money. I'll find another way, Mia scoffed. Good luck with that. You'll come crawling back in 6 months when you're broke. I stood up, my hands trembling. No, I won't, I vowed, looking each of them in the eye. Don't ever expect to hear from me again. My mother stood as well, her expression icy. That is your choice, Amy. If you choose to walk away from this family because you didn't get your way, then don't be surprised when the door is closed behind you. There was no negotiation, no compromise, no ounce of maternal softness. It was an ultimatum, their way or the highway, so I chose the highway. I walked out of that room, out of that house, and as the front door clicked shut behind me, I felt the chilling finality of their decision. It wasn't just a no to a loan, it was a no to me. They hadn't just rejected my business, they had rejected my existence. The silence that followed that day was a testament to their conviction. They didn't call. They didn't text. It was as if I had simply ceased to be. That was the day my world broke, and the day I started building a new one from the pieces. The first few months after walking out were the hardest of my life. I had my beat-up car, a laptop, and about $300 to my name. The weight of my mother's final words and Mia's mocking smile pressed down on me constantly. I slept on the couch of a college friend, Sarah, who became my lifeline. Every morning, I woke up with a hollow ache in my chest, a phantom limb where my family used to be. I'd check my phone, a pathetic sliver of hope flickering before being extinguished by the continued silence. They were really doing it. They had cut me out completely. Sarah would find me staring at my phone, her expression a mix of pity and anger. They're not worth it, Amy, she'd say, handing me a cup of coffee. They don't deserve you. Intellectually, I knew she was right. Emotionally, I was a wreck. The betrayal felt like a physical illness, a fever that wouldn't break. The rejection wasn't just about the money, it was about my worth. They had weighed my dream against their comfort and found it lacking. They had listened to Mia, the established success, over me, the unproven risk. That hierarchy, that blatant favoritism, was a wound that festered. But that wound also became my fuel. The anger, the hurt, the burning need to prove them wrong, it was a powerful motivator. I couldn't let Mia's prophecy come true. I would not crawl back. So, I worked. I worked with a ferocity I didn't know I possessed. I took a job waiting tables at a greasy diner from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Then, I'd go to the public library. The only place with free, reliable Wi-Fi. And code until they kicked me out at 9 p.m., I'd go back to Sarah's couch, my eyes burning from staring at the screen, and sleep for a few hours before doing it all over again. Sync flow was my obsession. It was my lifeboat in an ocean of loneliness. Every line of code I wrote was a brick in the wall I was building between my past and my future. Every bug I fixed was a small victory against the voices of doubt they had planted in my head. 6 months passed. I hadn't crawled back. I had saved up a few $1,000s. It wasn't enough for an office, but it was enough to rent a tiny, windowless room in a shared apartment and buy my own internet connection. It felt like a palace. It was during this time that I caught my first break. I was beta testing my software and had given free trial accounts to a few local businesses I'd cold called. One of them, a small artisanal bakery, was run by a woman named Clara. She loved the software. It streamlined her orders, managed her inventory, and saved her hours every day. She became my first ev. Angelist, she told another small business owner, who told two more. Word of mouth started to spread through the local small business community. By the end of the first year, I had 10 paying clients. It was barely enough to cover my rent and ramen noodle budget, but it was revenue. It was proof that my idea had value. I used that small success to apply for a microloan from a nonprofit that supported women in tech. I went into the meeting armed with testimonials from my clients and a year's worth of data. This time, I wasn't a naive kid asking her parents for help. I was a business owner with a proven product. They gave me $25,000. It felt like $1 billion. That money was the turning point. I quit my waitressing job. I hired a freelance developer, a young prodigy from India named Raj, who I'd found on an online platform. He was brilliant and shared my vision. For the next 2 years, we were a 2-person army. We worked 18-hour days, refining the software, adding features, and providing obsessive customer support. We reinvested every penny back into the business. I didn't buy new clothes, I bought more server space. I didn't go on vacation, I learned accounting and digital marketing from online tutorials. My social life was non-existent. My world was my tiny apartment and the glowing screen of my laptop. The silence from my family was a constant, low hum in the background of my life. There were moments of weakness, especially on birthdays and holidays. I'd see families laughing in restaurants or shopping together, and the ache would return, sharp and sudden. One Christmas, I almost broke. I typed out a long, rambling email to my mother, pouring out all my pain and loneliness. My finger hovered over the send button for a full 10 minutes before I deleted it. What was the point? They had made their position clear. Reaching out would only be interpreted as weakness, as me crawling back just as Mia predicted. It would invalidate everything I was working for. So, I pushed the loneliness down and coded through the holidays. Around year 4, things started to accelerate. We landed a major client, a regional chain of coffee shops. Their contract alone doubled our annual revenue. That got us noticed. An article was written about SyncFlow in a popular tech blog, calling us a disruptor in the small business SaaS space. The morning that article went live, my inbox was flooded with inquiries from potential clients and, for the first time, investors. I was terrified and exhilarated. I spent weeks preparing, drawing on the memory of that disastrous family meeting. This time, I would be unshakable. I took meetings with 3 different venture capital firms. I walked in not as a supplicant, but as a founder. I knew my numbers, I knew my market, and I knew the value of what I had built. I turned down 2 offers before accepting one from a firm that shared my long-term vision. They invested $2 million. The next 4 years were a blur of exponential growth. We hired a team. We moved into a real office. SyncFlow became a leader in its niche. We expanded our services, acquired a smaller competitor, and our user base grew into the hundreds of thousands. My life transformed. I went from a girl in a windowless room to the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. I bought a small, comfortable house. I started taking weekends off. I even started dating. I built a new family, a chosen family from my friends like Sarah, my team like Raj, and my mentors in the industry. They were the ones who celebrated my successes and supported me through the challenges. The silence from my biological family continued, unbroken. I learned through the grapevine, a distant cousin who would occasionally send a pitying text, that they knew of my success. They had seen the articles. They knew I was no longer the struggling dreamer they had cast out. But still, nothing. No call of congratulations, no email of apology, not a single word. Their silence was no longer just a rejection, it was a deliberate, ongoing statement. My success didn't fit their narrative. In their story, I was the reckless failure and Mia was the star. Acknowledging my achievements would mean admitting they were wrong, catastrophically wrong. And for my proud, image-obsessed family, that was an impossibility. So they pretended I didn't exist. And after 8 years, I had finally learned to do the same. Life had found a rhythm of peaceful productivity. My days were filled with strategy meetings, product development cycles, and the satisfying hum of a company running smoothly. I had sold a significant portion of SyncFlow in a strategic partnership, which had left me with a level of wealth I had never imagined. It was with this newfound freedom that I built my dream home, the glass house on the cliff. It wasn't about showing off. It was about creating a sanctuary. The vast panes of glass, the open spaces, the endless view of the ocean, it was the physical manifestation of the life I had built for myself, transparent, open, and with no dark corners to hide in. It was my fortress of solitude, a place where the ghosts of my past couldn't reach me, or so I thought. The day they reappeared was a Tuesday. It was an unusually sunny afternoon for early spring, and I was working from my home office, which had a panoramic view of the coastline. My assistant, Lena, buzzed me on the intercom. "Amy, you have some visitors at the front gate," she said, her voice laced with confusion. "They say they're your family." A jolt, cold and electric, shot through me. I swiveled my chair to look at the security monitor, and there they were, Alfred, Nicola, and Mia. They looked older, more tired than I remembered. My father's shoulders were slumped, his face etched with worry. My mother's hair was grayer, her lips pressed into a thin, tight line of anxiety. Mia, ever the picture of corporate perfection, looked strained. Her expensive suit was slightly rumpled, and she kept glancing around as if she were afraid of being seen. They stood huddled together in front of the imposing steel gate, looking small and out of place against the modern architecture of my home. 8 years. 8 years of absolute, deafening silence, and they just show up. My first instinct was a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. How dare they? After everything they did, after everything they didn't do, how dare they stand at my gate as if they had any right to be here? "Tell them I'm not available," I said, my voice clipped and cold. "Tell them to make an appointment in about 100 years. "Amy," Lena said gently, "your mother, she's crying." I zoomed in on the monitor, and Lena was right. Nicola, my stoic, unmovable mother, was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. It wasn't the dramatic, crocodile tears I would have expected. It looked genuine, a quiet, desperate sort of weeping. Against my better judgment, a flicker of something, not forgiveness, but a painful, vestigial sense of duty, stirred within me. It was the programming of a lifetime, the child in me who still, somewhere deep down, wanted her mother's approval. I hated myself for it. "Let them in," I sighed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Let them into the courtyard. I'll be down in a minute." I needed a moment to compose myself, to build my walls back up. I walked to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. The 22-year-old girl who had walked out of their house was gone. In her place was a 30-year-old woman, the CEO of her own company, the master of her own life. I had survived them. I had thrived in spite of them. I would not let them break me now. I put on the emotional armor I had spent 8 years forging. When I walked out into the central courtyard, a serene space with a zen garden and a small waterfall, they were standing there awkwardly, looking around at the soaring glass walls and minimalist design. My father was the first to speak, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "Amy, this place is incredible. It's what I built when you shut the door on me," I replied, my tone flat. There would be no pleasantries, no pretending the last 8 years hadn't happened. Mia stepped forward, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Amy, you look wonderful, success suits you." "What do you want, Mia?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. My directness seemed to startle them. They exchanged nervous glances. It was my mother who finally broke the silence, her voice trembling. "We need your help, Amy. We're in terrible trouble." I just looked at her. The woman who had told me I was a disappointment, who had chosen her own pride over her daughter's dream, was now standing in my home, begging. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. "Trouble?" I repeated, feigning mild curiosity. "What kind of trouble?" My father, Alfred, finally looked me in the eye, and the shame I saw there was profound. "My business," he mumbled, his voice cracking. "It's gone. I took out some bad loans a few years ago to try and expand, to compete with the cheaper imports. The debt piled up. The bank is foreclosing on the workshop, and on the house. The house, their house, the one I grew up in, the one they threw me out of. I see, I said, my voice betraying no emotion. So Dad made some bad business decisions. What does that have to do with me? It's not just the business, Mia jumped in, her composure starting to crack. I. I co-signed on his last big loan to help him out. My assets are tied to his. They're coming after my savings, my apartment, everything. The perfect daughter, the successful lawyer. Her world was crumbling too, and my mother? We have nowhere to go, Nicola whispered, tears now streaming freely down her face. We'll be on the street. Everything we've ever worked for, it's all gone. They stood there, a trinity of ruin, their care. Fully constructed world collapsing around them. They had come to me, the daughter they had disowned, because I was their only remaining hope. They weren't here because they missed me. They weren't here to apologize. They were here because they were desperate and they saw me not as a person but as a bank, a solution to their problems, a walking, talking ATM. I let the silence stretch, watching them squirm. I watched the hope in their eyes flicker and dim as I remained impassive. Finally, I spoke. So, let me get this straight, I said, my voice as cold and clear as the glass surrounding us. After 8 years of complete silence, you've come to my home to ask me for money to fix the mess you made of your own lives. They had no answer. They just stared at me, their faces a mixture of desperation, shame, and a disgusting, misplaced flicker of expectation. They still, after everything, expected me to save them, because deep down, they still believed it was my duty. In the heavy silence of the courtyard, I watched them. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, vindication, anger, and a deep, aching sadness. But beneath it all, a cold, analytical part of my brain, the part that ran a multi-million-dollar company, was taking over. I needed information. I couldn't trust a single word that came out of their mouths. Their story was plausible, but it felt incomplete. There was a missing piece, a reason why things had gotten so catastrophically bad that their only option was to crawl to me. I want to see the paperwork, I said, my voice sharp and businesslike. All of it. The loan agreements, the foreclosure notices, the bank statements, everything. Mia looked offended. You don't believe us? I don't trust you, I corrected her. There's a difference. If you want my help, you'll be transparent. Completely. You can have the documents messengered here by the end of the day. My father just nodded numbly, but Mia and my mother exchanged a look, a quick, furtive glance that screamed they were hiding something, but they were in no position to argue. They agreed. They left shortly after, a cloud of desperation hanging in the air where they had stood. The moment they were gone, I made a call. Not to a lawyer, not yet. I called a private investigator, a man named Mr. Davies, who my company had used in the past for discreet corporate due diligence. He was expensive, but he was the best. I need a complete financial workup on 3 individuals, I told him, giving him their names. Alfred, Nicola, and Mia, I want to know everything. Assets, debts, business dealings, the works. I want to know why they're really in trouble. And I need it yesterday. While I waited for both the paperwork from my family and the report from Davies, I tried to work, but I couldn't focus. The past was no longer a distant memory. It was a living, breathing entity that had invaded my sanctuary. That evening, a thick manila envelope arrived. I spread the documents across my massive oak desk. It was all there, just as they'd said. My father's carpentry business was drowning in debt from a series of high-interest loans. The final foreclosure notice on their home was dated for the end of the next month. Mia's name was on the most recent, largest loan as a cosigner, making her equally liable. On the surface, it was a simple, tragic story of a small business owner who got in over his head. It was almost enough to make me feel a pang of sympathy. Almost. But that look between Mia and my mother still bothered me. Mr. Davies called me 2 days later. I have my report, he said, his voice graveled and professional. It's interesting. Tell me, I said, leaning forward in my chair. Alfred's business troubles are legitimate, Davies began. He expanded too quickly and couldn't keep up with the debt payments. Standard stuff. The mother, Nicola, has a clean record. Her teacher's pension is modest but untouched. But the sister, Mia, that's where the story gets complicated. My heart began to beat a little faster. Go on. Your sister wasn't just a cosigner on your father's final loan, he explained. She was the one who arranged it. She works in corporate law, but her firm has a small, aggressive private lending division. She pushed your father toward a lender known for its predatory terms. The interest rate was astronomical, with a balloon payment that was impossible for a business of his size to ever meet. I felt the air leave my lungs. Why would she do that to her own father? That's the million-dollar question, Davies said, but it gets worse. A significant portion of that final loan, nearly $200,000, wasn't reinvested into the carpentry business. It was transferred directly into a private investment account under Mia's name. I was silent, processing the sheer venom of it. And the investment? I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. It went bust, Davies said. She invested heavily in a high-risk biotech startup that folded. Ed, 6 months ago, the money is gone, all of it. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just a case of my father's business failing. This was a deliberate act of sabotage and greed by my sister. She had used our father's desperation as an opportunity. She convinced him to take out a loan she knew he could never repay, skimmed a huge chunk off the top for her own gamble, and when it failed, she let the whole house of cards collapse on top of him, knowing she would be dragged down with it. And now, she was standing in front of me, playing the part of the dutiful daughter caught in the crossfire, hoping I would be her get-out-of-jail-free card. The rage I had felt earlier was nothing compared to the ice-cold fury that now filled me. It was a pure, clarifying anger. And what about my mother? Did she know? One last thing, Davies added, as if reading my mind. I checked phone records. The day after that biotech stock crashed, there was a 2-hour phone call between Mia's cell and your mother's landline. So my mother knew. She knew her golden child had defrauded her own father and driven the family to ruin. And she had stood in my courtyard, weeping and begging for my help, maintaining the lie. She was complicit, protecting her favorite daughter, even at the cost of her husband's livelihood and home. They weren't just desperate. They were deceitful. They were manipulators of the highest order. The painful discovery wasn't that my family was in trouble. It was the realization of the true depth of their toxicity. My rejection 8 years ago wasn't just about a loan. It was about my refusal to play their games, to fit into their hierarchy where Mia's ambition was nurtured and mine was dismissed. I was inconvenient to their worldview, so they cut me out. But now that Mia's brand of ruthless ambition had finally backfired, they needed a new piece to play on their chessboard. They needed me. They had come to me with a story of tragedy, hoping to appeal to a daughter's lingering love and sense of duty. But the reality was so much uglier. It was a story of greed, betrayal, and breathtaking selfishness. They hadn't come to me for help. They had come for a bailout to make me pay for their sins. I looked out the window at the calm, endless ocean. For 8 years, I had thought their greatest crime was their silence. I was wrong. Their greatest crime was who they were. And now, they had given me all the evidence I needed. The fury I felt after Mr. Davies' call was a cold, hard diamond in my chest. It wasn't the hot, messy anger of my youth. This was a controlled, focused rage. It was the anger of a CEO who has just uncovered a massive fraud within her own ranks. The instinct to simply call them, expose their lies, and hang up was strong. But it felt insufficient. It wouldn't heal the wound they had inflicted 8 years ago. It wouldn't address the breathtaking arrogance of their current deception. A simple no wasn't enough. They had turned my life into a drama, casting me as the villainous, selfish child. Now I would write the final act, and I would be the director. I spent the next 2 days in meticulous planning. I instructed Mr. Davies to compile his findings into a neat, undeniable dossier, complete with bank transfer records, call logs, and a profile of the predatory lender Mia had used. I then contacted my personal wealth manager and my lawyer, explaining the situation in detail. I didn't want to just turn them away. I wanted to dismantle their expectations with surgical precision. I wanted them to walk into my world and see, in excruciating detail, everything they had thrown away. And then, I wanted them to leave with absolutely nothing but the weight of their own choices. My plan was simple, yet cruel in its elegance. I would invite them back to my house, but not for a tense conversation in the courtyard. I would offer them a full tour. I would play the part of the gracious, successful daughter, showing them every corner of the life I had built without them. I would let them marinate in their awe and their greed, letting their hopes build to a fever pitch. I would make them believe, for a few short hours, that salvation was within their grasp. Then and only then would I lower the boom. I called my mother. Her voice was anxious, hopeful. "Amy, did you look at the papers? Can you help us?" "I've reviewed the situation," I said, my tone carefully neutral. "It's complex. I think it's best if we discuss it in person. Why don't you, Dad, and Mia come over for dinner on Saturday night? We can talk things through properly." I could hear the audible sigh of relief on the other end of the line. "Oh, Amy, thank you." "Thank you, we knew you wouldn't let us down." The condescending assumption in her voice, the idea that my help was a foregone conclusion, only strengthened my resolve. "Just one thing," I added. "I'd like to give you a proper tour of the house first. You didn't get to it last time." "We'd love that," she gushed. The bait was taken. Saturday arrived. I spent the day preparing, but not in the kitchen. I had the dinner catered by one of the finest restaurants in the city. The dining room table was set with exquisite china and crystal. I instructed my small household staff to be professional but distant. The stage needed to be perfect. The house itself was a key character in this play. The soaring ceilings, the art on the walls, the infinity pool that seemed to merge with the ocean. It was all designed to be a silent, overwhelming testament to my success. It was a physical representation of the $50,000 loan they had denied me, multiplied 1,000 times over. When they arrived, they were dressed for a funeral, their faces etched with practiced solemnity. But as Lena led them into the grand entryway, their jaws went slack. Their eyes darted everywhere, trying to calculate the value of everything they saw. Greed is a poor actor, and it was written all over their faces. "Welcome," I said, greeting them with a smile that felt like stretching a cold rubber band across my face. "I'm so glad you could make it. Can I get you something to drink before we begin the tour?" They accepted, still looking dazed. I handed them glasses of sparkling water. I wasn't about to waste my good champagne on them. "So," I began, my voice light and cheerful, "let's start with the West Wing." I led them through the house like a proud museum curator. I showed them the state-of-the-art kitchen, the home theater with its velvet seats, the climate-controlled wine cellar. With every room, their awe grew, and so did the undercurrent of desperate hope in their conversation. "Oh, Amy, this is just breathtaking," my mother would say, her hand on a marble countertop. "You've done so well for yourself." "We are so proud of you," my father mumbled, though he couldn't quite look me in the eye. Mia was the most transparent. She asked pointed questions about the security system, the property taxes, the value of the art. She wasn't seeing a home, she was seeing assets. She was mentally liquidating my life to pay for her mistakes. I took them past my home office. "This is where it all started," I said casually, gesturing to the sleek, minimalist space. "The heart of SyncFlow was built right in here. It's amazing what you can achieve with a little bit of seed money, isn't it?" The barb, subtle as it was, landed. Mia flinched and my mother's smile tightened. I saved the best for last. I led them out onto the main terrace overlooking the ocean as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The view was spectacular, a portrait of infinite possibility. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" I said softly. "Sometimes I come out here and just think, it's peaceful. It helps me remember what's important." They stood beside me, silent for a moment, mesmerized by the view. They were at the peak of the roller coaster. They saw the life they could have access to, the wealth that could solve all their problems. They thought they had made it. They thought the guilt trip and the sob story had worked. They believed their daughter, the one they had so easily discarded, was about to welcome them back into the fold and write a check that would erase all their sins. The stage was set. The audience was captive. It was time for the final performance to begin. "Dinner is almost ready," I said, turning back toward the house. "Let's go to the dining room. We have a lot to discuss." The dining room was illuminated by a modern chandelier that cast a warm, golden glow over the perfectly set table. The aroma of the catered meal, seared scallops, roasted duck, and truffle risotto, filled the air. It was a scene of opulent comfort, designed to be the final, tantalizing glimpse of the world they were about to be ejected from. They sat down, looking a little overwhelmed, their eyes fixed on me with a desperate, hungry anticipation. I let them take a few bites of the appetizer, letting the silence build. I wanted them to taste the success they had so vehemently bet against. Finally, I dabbed my lips with a linen napkin and placed it on the table. "So," I began, my voice calm and measured, "we're here to talk about your financial situation." 3 heads nodded eagerly. "Yes," my mother said, her voice laced with an almost reverent hope. "Amy, whatever you can do to help, we would be forever grateful." "I'm sure you would be," I said, my smile not reaching my eyes. "I've had some time to review the documents you sent over. I also took the liberty of having my own people look into the matter more deeply. I believe in due diligence. It's how I built my company." A flicker of fear appeared in Mia's eyes. She knew. She knew this was not going to be a simple negotiation. I picked up a slim folder from the chair beside me. It was Mr. Davies' report. I slid it onto the center of the table. "This is what my investigation foe." "Und," I said. "Dad, it's true your business is failing. You overextended, you took on bad debt. Those were your choices, your mistakes." My father shrank in his chair, the shame evident on his face. I then turned my gaze to Mia. "But it's funny, isn't it? The biggest, most destructive loan, the one that truly sank the ship, was arranged by you, Mia, through a predatory lender your firm sometimes works with, a loan with terms so obviously impossible that it was practically designed to fail." Mia went pale. "I was just trying to help." "Were you?" I interrupted, my voice as sharp as broken glass. I opened the folder and slid a bank statement across the table toward her. "Were you trying to help when you diverted $200,000 of that loan into your personal investment account? Were you helping Dad when you gambled his company's last hope on a biotech stock that crashed and burned?" The color drained completely from Mia's face. My mother gasped, looking from the paper to her eldest daughter in feigned shock. "Mia, is this true?" "Oh, stop it, Mom," I snapped, turning my cold fury on her. "Don't you dare pretend you're surprised." My investigator found the phone records. You and Mia had a very long conversation the day after her investment disappeared. You've known all along. You knew she defrauded your own husband, and you stood in my courtyard and lied to my face. My mother began to stammer, her carefully constructed victimhood shattering into a million pieces. "We were desperate. I was trying to protect my family." "You were trying to protect her," I said, pointing a finger at Mia. "Just like you always have. You chose the daughter you thought was a winner and threw the other one away. The problem is, your prize pony ran the family business into the ground, and now you want the one you sent to the glue factory to pay for it." The room was silent except for their ragged breathing. The truth was laid bare on the mahogany table between us, ugly and undeniable. "So no," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous level. "I will not be helping you. I will not give you a single cent." My mother started to sob, real tears of panic this time. "Amy, please, you can't do this. We're your family. We'll be homeless." "You stopped being my family 8 years ago," I retorted, standing up from the table. "You made your choice when you slammed the door on a 22-year-old kid with a dream. You chose your pride and your prejudice over your own daughter. You told me not to be surprised when the door was closed behind me. Well, here we are." I walked over to the grand glass doors that led out to the terrace. "The tour is over," I announced, my voice echoing slightly in the vast room. "You saw my home, you saw my life. You saw everything you could have been a part of if you had shown a single ounce of faith, a single shred of decency. But you didn't, so now you get to have exactly what you gave me, nothing." Alfred, my father, finally spoke, his voice a broken whisper. "Amy, I'm so sorry." "I'm sure you are," I said without looking at him. "You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry your bad decisions have consequences. You're sorry I'm not the gullible little girl you remember. But it's too late for sorry." I opened the door. The cool night air rushed in, a stark contrast to the heated tension in the room. "My head of security will escort you out." Mia, her face a mask of rage and disbelief, finally found her voice. "You'll regret this. You'll be all alone in this giant, empty house." I turned to face her one last time and gave her a genuine smile. "You're wrong, Mia. This house isn't empty. It's full. It's full of peace and self-respect and freedom from people like you. I'm not alone. I'm finally free." They were herded out by my security guard, their protests and pleas fading as they were led down the long driveway. I stood there for a long time, watching their car's taillights disappear into the darkness. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't screamed. I had simply served them the truth, cold and unvarnished, on a silver platter. The performance was over. And the applause was the beautiful, beautiful silence they left behind. After they were gone, the house felt cavernous. The silence they left behind was different from the peaceful quiet I was used to. It was a ringing silence, the kind that follows a loud explosion. I walked through the dining room, where the remnants of their unfinished, expensive meal sat on the table. It looked like a photograph from a fallen empire. I had expected to feel a surge of triumphant joy, a cathartic release, and there was a part of me that did feel a grim satisfaction. I had faced my ghosts and they had blinked. I had taken back the narrative of my own life, refusing to be the convenient savior in their story of self-inflicted ruin. But as the adrenaline faded, what washed over me was not elation, but a profound and heavy exhaustion. The anger that had fueled them. For the past week had burned out, leaving behind the hollow ache of a very old wound. Kicking them out hadn't magically erased the 8 years of loneliness. Exposing their lies didn't undo the initial betrayal. Vengeance, I was discovering, was a temporary anesthetic, not a cure. I went out to the terrace and sank into one of the chairs, pulling a blanket around my shoulders against the cool ocean breeze. I stared out at the dark water, where the moonlight created a shimmering path to the horizon. For so long, my life had been defined by two opposing forces: the drive to build my company and the pain of my family's rejection. I had used their disbelief as fuel for my ambition. Proving them wrong had been a powerful motivator, a shadow I was constantly running from and trying to outshine. Now, what? The shadow was gone. I had faced it, and it had scattered. I was left standing alone in the light, and for the first time in a long time, I had to decide what to do next without that darkness nipping at my heels. A few days later, a letter arrived. It was from my father. His handwriting was shaky, the words of a man completely broken. It wasn't a plea for money. It was a confession. He admitted his weakness, his cowardice in letting Mia and my mother control the family's decisions. He wrote about his quiet pride in my success, a pride he was too afraid to ever express. He apologized for not being the father I deserved. He didn't ask for forgiveness or for me to contact him. He just wanted me to know. I read the letter twice, then folded it and put it away. It didn't change anything, but it was a single, solitary note of truth in a symphony of lies. It was an acknowledgement, and perhaps that was all I could ever expect from him. Life began to settle into a new normal. The company continued to thrive. My friendships, my chosen family, deepened. I started to invest my time and money in things that had nothing to do with proving anyone wrong. I funded a scholarship for young women entering the tech field, specifically for those from low-income backgrounds. I volunteered at a local mentorship program for aspiring entrepreneurs. I was building a legacy that wasn't about the glass house on the cliff, but about opening doors for others, the kind of door that had been slammed in my face. About a year later, I heard through that same distant cousin what had become of them. The house was gone. Alfred was working part-time at a big-box hardware store, his hands that had once crafted fine furniture now stocking shelves. Nicola had gone back to substitute teaching. They lived in a small, cramped apartment. Mia's fate was the most dramatic. Her involvement in the fraudulent loan, though not criminal, had been enough to get her fired when her firm found out. Disgraced and disbarred for ethical violations, she was last seen working as a paralegal, a shadow of the corporate shark she once was. Their world had shrunk to the size of their own bitterness. They had gotten exactly what they deserved, and I felt nothing. Their downfall brought me no pleasure. Their struggle was a distant echo from a life that was no longer mine. Their story was over. My story, however, was just beginning. Standing on my terrace, looking at the endless horizon, I realized the mansion wasn't a monument to my victory over them. It was a testament to my survival. The ultimate revenge wasn't the confrontation or kicking them out. It was the life I built. It was the joy I found, the love I nurtured in my chosen family, and the purpose I discovered in my work. It was waking up every morning in a house filled with peace, knowing that my happiness was not dependent on their approval or their punishment. The future was an unwritten page, a blank canvas. And for the first time, I was free to paint it however I wished, with no shadows in the corners, no ghosts in the halls. Just the bright, clear light of a life that was entirely and finally my own.